Greetings and welcome to the review section of this month's tarot spread. Today we're going to be reviewing the Break Out of a Rut spread from 365 Tarot Spreads by Sasha Graham. This is the reading that we've been using for November. I really kind of liked the theme, at least, of this reading because I feel personally that I have been stuck in a rut for a while, and getting a bit of clarity like we did last week really did give me something to think about. So if you watched last week's video, I hope you also gained some kind of clarity. If you missed it, I'll put a link in the bottom. So the breakout of a rut spread, it says that on this day, the Roman Catholic Church dedicates today to all the souls currently residing in purgatory. Purgatory is generally understood as the boundary between heaven and hell. It is the temporary and often uncomfortable waiting place for those souls who need purification before entering heaven. So this was the reading from November 2nd, which is kind of connected to All Souls Day and the idea that when some souls die, they go into purgatory because they need to stay there for a certain amount of time, either until they can be deemed that they've cleared enough to be able to move on, or that the decision has been made that they are, again, to move on, but in a different direction. It says here that years ago, Catholics dedicated the entire month of November to praying for the souls in purgatory. Almsgiving, donating money and food to the poor, and acts of penance were said to reduce the time a soul spent in purgatory. And so I guess the idea is that you can diminish the amount of time you will spend in purgatory by doing things that will benefit other people. And the fact that they dedicated the entire month of November um, shows that they thought that, if they could give a whole month to it, that would kind of save them from any extra time in purgatory. They connect the Six of Pentacles to this reading because they say that the Six of Pentacles reflects the idea of almsgiving, helping others. And when this card appears in a reading, discover which character you identify with. Are you the alms giver, or are you the figure accepting the coins? And the Six of Coins to me also has that idea of, I mean, in this context, it doesn't matter which one you are. It's being okay with which one you are. So if you have the ability to give, to be giving generously with no strings attached, right? Like if you donate to a food bank, if you donate to any kind of charity, to make sure that you're giving it without the intention of getting something back in return. A lot of times people will donate and they want to donate the X amount that needs to be donated in order to get like a tax receipt so they can then claim it on their taxes, as opposed to just, here, I'm going to drop some pennies or something like that into the bucket as I kind of walk by, because I just want to make sure that I'm giving something back. The other side of it is being open to receiving, and that I think is a lot harder for most of us, that it's okay, we can give kind of freely, or we can give with this idea that I'm in a good position so I can donate, but to have to admit that you need help, right? A lot of people say that use the food banks, they are so filled with shame and guilt for having to do that, because there's this sense that if I have to ask other people for help, then I'm not a good enough person. And then it will greatly diminish people's self-love and their sense of value. And so I think it's really important to be able to break that story and to decondition around the idea that if you have to accept help, that you are less than. We all need help at some point or another. We all need some kind of support, whether it's a physical support, whether it's a mental, emotional, spiritual support. We all will have a point in time where we're going to either need to be asking for help or accepting the support that's offered to us. So the summation of this spread says, do you feel stuck? Yes, I do feel stuck. In a general sense, purgatory is understood as a waiting place or waiting room before heaven. The questions of this spread are based on the idea of being stuck in earthly limbo, and the questions are designed to help you break free. And I think that a lot of us, because we get caught up either in old stories that we have, or when we have a crisis or a transition point, we don't know how to switch out of the old story and into something new, and we get stuck. And especially if we have a situation where there's an event that happens that totally changes our lives, and we have no idea how to adjust to that. Sometimes it can be something really great. So, for instance, if you have a marriage or the birth of a baby, like those are really big things, but they really do change the story of who we are. They really do change the perception we have to have of ourselves, and we sometimes have to let go of the older stories to be able to say, okay, what's the story I'm writing now? There are then also the more negative kind of ones where the death of a family member, an accident that totally changes your life, either the onset of a sudden disability or a sudden illness. These are things again that cause us to have to switch our story. And sometimes when we get stuck, it's because we don't accept that the story has changed. We don't know how to accept the changes. We don't know what to change. So these are all things that are really, really important to be aware of when we're stuck. Because if you're stuck in a mental story, then you're going to want to have different things to kind of kick you out of it. If you're stuck in a physical story, right? If you don't have enough money, if you have a physical disability, if there's some kind of resource issue, that's going to be a different way to get unstuck. And so I think this idea of sitting kind of in that purgatory or that stuckness long enough to understand where and how you're stuck, because the more that you understand where and how you're stuck, the easier it will be to know what kind of resources and supports you need to get out of it. So this spread had 8 cards in it, and they are listed like kind of in a ladder going forward, where one is the bottom left corner, and then 8 is in the top right corner. It says, cast as a lifeline up and out of the tedious waiting room. So again, it's like a set of stairs going upwards. And the idea, I would think, is that yes, it is to get you out, but each step will build upon the other. You have to kind of go and deal with whatever is at step number one before you can go to step number two. Because unless you have really, really long legs, which I don't, then you can't go from step one all the way up to step 8. You have to go through it in a process. And keep in mind that with a lot of these things too, is you might have to go back a couple steps, right? Like you might have to go up a few, and then that'll unlock something that you have to go back to clear out and move forward. So the questions that they have here, so the first question they ask is, what am I avoiding? Definitely a good question to start off with, because avoidance is almost always behind our stuckness. There's something that is there. And whether we're conscious or unconscious of it, we will have this uncomfortable feeling in our body that we will want to make that go away. And so when we move towards whatever the new story is, when we move towards unstuckness, it will make a physical reaction. And then we end up wanting to avoid that physical reaction because 9 times out of 10, it's an uncomfortable feeling that we have. And uncomfortable makes us think bad. And so we need to kind of clear that idea out, because yes, uncomfortable may lead to bad, but sometimes uncomfortable is what we need to go through in order to get something good. Um, I think of this kind of also a lot in like the medical field, right? So if anybody's ever gone through a colonoscopy, it is a very horrible, uncomfortable thing to have to go through. But at the end, especially if you get a clear bill of health, it is worth having to go through. And so I think starting off right away with what is it that I'm avoiding is a really good way to start the process of getting unstuck. The second one is, what am I gaining by remaining in this stasis? And I really do like this question as well, because a lot of times there's a secondary identity that's holding us in stasis. So, for instance, if you're playing victim in your situation, then by moving out of stasis, you have to let that go. And maybe by being a victim in your story and having people come to help you, it's giving you a bit of a dopamine boost, because you're like going, oh, I'm special enough that this person's coming to help me. Oh, there's something here that is important, that it's feeding that secondary identity. A lot of times that's what we're afraid to face, is the secondary identity that likes being stuck, that likes being in that other story, because it's easier and it feels safer for that secondary identity to be there. And a lot of times the secondary identity feels that if we move out of stuckness, I will have to disappear. And so looking at secondary gains to a stuckness gives us a different way of looking at the situation, because if we have a secondary gain or a secondary identity that is feeding off of this stuckness, we need to resolve that before we can move on. And by resolving that, it might also start to make us understand why the situation makes us feel uncomfortable. And then again, like I said, so you go to the secondary gains, and then you might have to go back to the what am I avoiding? Because there might be more than one. So you might have to go back and forth a little bit between that in order to get enough of that cleared out to be able to move to step three, which is, do I blame others for my circumstances? Now, in this situation, this is a question that um, I understand why it's here, and I think it definitely could be reworded in a way, because when you go, do I blame others for my circumstances? It is a yes, no question. And I have said this before, I avoid at all costs yes, no questions, because they don't give you um an action point, right? Like they don't give you something to look at. They don't give you something to work on. Because even if the answer is yes, I do blame somebody, then you can just go, okay, and then move on. But I think that when you're looking at blame, right? There's a wound there. There's something there that we're not willing to take responsibility for. So if you're looking at like, do I blame others for my circumstances? You might want to word it in a way to say, what am I avoiding taking responsibility for that I'm shifting the blame to other people, right? Because even if you do blame someone else for where you are, there's nothing you can do about it. We can't impact or affect other people's actions. Everybody's responsible for their own actions, just as we're responsible for ours. And so, by taking accountability, taking responsibility for what's going on in our situation, it will help us to understand where we've been blaming other people, or where we have the victim mentality or the martyr mentality, or all of the limiting type of mentalities that tell us, well, it's their fault I'm here, so there's nothing I can do. There's always something we can do. We just have to be willing to maybe be a little bit creative about it, need to be a little bit risk taking about it, but there's always something we can do. When we do nothing and when we blame other people, that just contributes to remaining stuck. The next one we have is, how is fear affecting my decision? And I think fear and resistance, are the avoidance, kind of go hand in hand. So I might actually say, like, so what am I avoiding? What am I afraid of? I would kind of put those together instead of having it so far down the path. But fear affecting my decision is definitely an interesting way to piece to bring in. But instead of like, how is fear affecting my decision, it might be more, what can I learn from my fears at this time? Because fear comes up in the way that when something happens and we have resistance or we have fear, what that is that's our not our immune system, sorry, our nervous system saying, ooh, this looks like, this feels like, this reminds us of when we were 10 and we fell off our bicycle. And that was horrible. And we didn't like that. And so this is going to end up being the same thing. So we don't like this. And we need to kind of look at what's going on, because when we were 10 and we fell off our bike, things happened for a reason, because it was directly connected to a physical, emotional situation that we had. We need to be able to go in and rewire the brain to be able to say, this is different. It may look the same, it may feel the same, but it's different, right? You can sit there and say that two birds are the same because they look like birds and they seem like birds, but a blue jay is very, very different from an ostrich. And that's what we need to kind of be able to tell the brain, is to say, thank you for pointing this out, that this is similar to something that we've been through. However, it's different. So maybe we can try something different and see what happens. After we face our fears, then we have, what beliefs do I cling to that are no longer true? And this goes to what I was saying at the very beginning, is like, our beliefs are connected to the stories that we're telling. And one thing I heard a while ago that I thought was really, really good is that a belief is something that we have an understanding about from something other than experience. And so when you say, oh, I believe this happened, or I believe in this, most of the time we're using the belief because it's something that has been indoctrinated into us. It's something that we've been conditioned to, right? So if I say I believe the sky is blue, then I'm going, maybe somebody told me the sky was blue. The word that we want to be using is know. I know the sky is blue. So that if somebody says, how do you know? I say, I look outside and when I look up at the sky, I see blue. So to me, I know the sky is blue because when I see it, that's what I register. But if you're using belief, it's coming from someplace else. It's coming from something that is not the knowledge of experience. And so, what beliefs do I cling to that are no longer true? It's very important to be able to, when you're in stuckness, that you're looking at your stories and how you're talking about where you are. You're like, oh, I believe that nothing ever is going to happen, right? If you're saying that, then you're like, okay, well, how do you know that? Like, where's the proof of that? What are you holding true to? To be able to say, well, you know what? I know that right now it's difficult, because it's very hard to say, I know and generalize to a statement because then if people ask you, well, how do you know that? Right? Like, where's your proof? Where's your documentation? And so asking about what beliefs that we're clinging to is, I think, a really, really crucial piece. And it actually really kind of also would go back, I think, a few steps in the reading to go connect it with those secondary identities, because sometimes it's the secondary identities that are the root of the belief systems, because again, they connect to the fears that connect us back to a time when that was a situation that was true. So I believe that if I fall off a bike, right? If I was to fall off this bike, that it's going to be the same thing as what happened when I was young. But we don't know that because when we fell off a bike when we were young and we skimmed our knee, that's one thing. But if you're like 60 and you fall off a bike, there's a good chance you'll break an arm or break a leg or something worse, right? Because things are different. So you can say that what you can say is, I know if I fall off my bike, I'm going to get hurt. But you don't know how, and you can't believe that, like you can't say what's going to happen based on belief, if that makes any sense. The next one we have is, how do I break out of this rut? And this one I think is a very important question to be asking, right? Like, what is going to outweigh those secondary stories? What is going to help me overcome the fears? How can I come up with a creative solution that is not going to send my nervous system into shock and into crisis and then bring out all of the maybe not so healthy behaviors and reactions, right? Like, we want to be able to really think about a very good, solid way that we know that we can move out of this. The next one we have is, what specific opportunities should I look for? If you've been watching me enough, you'll know that the word should is something that makes me cringe, because should always will come with a couple of things. One is, should is always asking permission. And the second one is that should will always bring guilt and shame with it, because what we're doing is we're giving away our ability to make choices. We're giving away our ability to decide things and giving it to someone else, even if it's the universe that we're asking. Because what you're saying is, what should I do? It automatically implies that there is a right, absolute action that you need to be taking at this time. And if you don't take it, you're in the wrong. And so that's why I say it comes with shame and guilt, the word is. And so one of the easy ways to take a question that asks, should I XYZ, is to just rephrase the question. What specific opportunities may be presenting themselves, right? You want to be looking for multiple, right? What action, right? What specific opportunities should I be taking? Means there's a finite amount of things that you can do. But you want to be able to work with the universe. You want to be able to work with your circumstance to be able to say, well, okay, what opportunities may be presenting at this time? Because depending on the opportunities that you act on at this time will open the doors to others, close the doors to others, and it's going to be that domino effect. And so you want to be able to know that no matter what choice you make, no matter what action you take, that it is an opportunity that is available that you're responding to. However, there's no right answer. There's no right response for you to have to weigh, like hang your value and your self-love on that so that if you don't do it, then out comes the flails and you're whipping yourself into some kind of you know, situation where there's going to possibly be another prolonged period of being stuck. And the last card that they had in the reading is how do I take a small, meaningful step forward? This one I do like the way it is, right? Because it kind of ties into what I was just saying, is what are the opportunities that might be presenting and how can I take one small baby step forward, right? What will help me to overcome the avoidance, to overcome the secondary identities, to overcome the fear, so that I can feel as if I'm making one step forward. And sometimes it is such a minute little step forward that we take, but the impact it has on the entire system and how it begins to break down those old stories and to highlight the conditioning that we need to come out of, they can be monumental. So it's important for us to be able to have an idea of what it is that we want to do, where it is we want to go, but also to be able to go from that big idea of what's out there, take a step back so that we can then go, I'm going to take this little step today. And then I'm going to rest. And I'm going to give my body a chance to adjust. And I'm going to give my system a chance to adjust. And then the next day, I'll see how I'm feeling. And then I'll go through the process again. And you take every day kind of that way. And then the next thing you know, when you're looking at like how stuck you are, you're going to start to see that that stuckness has changed. It has shifted. It's different. And for to get out of a rut, that's what you're looking for, is you're looking for something different because the rut, like a groove, like the skip on a record player, all it does is it plays the same thing over and over again. All it does is have you going in the same direction, doing the same thing over and over again. And what you want to be looking at is to say, hey, I don't remember that tree. That's new. That's different. Okay, something different. Something has changed, right? We're not looking at polar oppositions are dualities in this sense, right? You're not going, I went from bad to good, right? What you're looking for is differences because bad and good are judgments that are based on experience and everything else that's going. And you want to kind of like go through everything as you're moving out of these ruts and looking at things and saying, I have something different because different is what we're looking for. We're not looking for better. We're not looking for worse. I don't think anybody's looking for worse, but we're not looking for judgmental movement. What we're looking for is we're looking for something different. And so, how is this step that we're taking making it different from what it was before? So, I hope that that gives you some ideas on how to take a reading like that, where you have questions in it that you like, that you think you can work with, and how you can adjust for other questions that are a little bit more problematic, as well as making it suit the progress and the direction that you're wanting to go in. And I hope that you stick with me as we progress through the month, because next week I will be doing a variation of the Getting Out of a Rut spread. And with that, I will see you next time. Take care.